I wanted to be the Karate Kid. As a scrawny 8-year-old in 1984, I idolized Daniel LaRusso, the Karate Kid. He took on Johnny Lawrence to defend Ali's honor, won the respect of the bad guys, and got a huge trophy after all. Disappointingly, there were no dojos or Mr. Miyagi's in the small Nebraska town where I grew up. So this particular dream of learning the martial arts was ultimately mothballed until I was an out-of-shape 43-year-old man grinding through a suburban cul-de-sac life with a minivan and 3 kids, and I decided to become a yellow belt. My son Tommy, a scrawny 8-year-old himself, had been taking Taekwondo lessons at Kong's Black Belt Academy for the last year. Every 3 months they would test for a new belt rank, and on a testing day when Tommy became a green belt, the owner, Mr. Lempert, offered all of the parents 1 free month of lessons if they wanted to try it out. You had to decide right then, though. I was content to let that offer pass. But my friend Adam, who has a son in class with Tommy, starts egging me on. "We're doing this, dude. Come on. Don't be a wimp." Peer pressure for middle-aged men is remarkably similar to that of little boys. While I was intrigued about the possibility of learning the martial arts, I had a number of internal excuses for why I shouldn't do it. First, as a rule, I don't like looking ridiculous. And the average age of the students is 8 years old. The juxtaposition of us in class is ludicrous. They come up to about our waist and weigh at least 100 pounds less. Second, I'm too old and too out of shape to learn a new physical activity. That time is over. A new experience now usually involves brunch. Finally, my biggest concern was the nagging thought, what if I fail? What if I fail in this thing that I've romanticized for all these years and that little kids succeed in all the time? Still, a part of me wanted to try it. And I do love getting a bargain. Plus, it was an opportunity to learn something new alongside my son, so I signed up. My first class arrived, and I put on my dobok, which is the traditional loose-fitting white outfit, and tied on my white belt, which signified my beginner rank. And I took my place at the far left of the line. The more experienced students, like Tommy, were lined up to the right of me. The first things I needed to learn were one-steps in a form called chunji. One-steps are your moves, essentially, blocks along with counter punches and kicks. I had to learn 5 unique one-steps. The chunji form is the more zen, spiritual side of Taekwondo, or was for me at least. I wouldn't exactly say that any of this came to me naturally, and I had a newfound appreciation for all the times that I'd seen Tommy kick with the wrong foot or turn in the wrong direction. Doing was a lot more difficult than watching. I also had to practice these moves through sparring. For me, sparring was the worst part. For one thing, I hadn't purchased my own sparring gear. So I had to dig in this large Rubbermaid bin through the motley assortment of equipment, which was mostly meant for kids whose parents were hedging their bet about whether or not their child would stick with lessons. Fortunately, I was able to find one piece of headgear that I could just barely squeeze onto my head. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the chin strap over even one of my chins, let alone both of them. But it was on so tight it didn't really matter. The other problem with sparring is that I was either facing off against Adam, who I haven't mentioned, fought in Iraq and works for the Secret Service protecting the president. So he knows what he's doing. Whereas me, I'm more of a lover than a fighter. And I'm not much of a lover, if we're being totally honest. Or I had to spar against little kids, which is just awkward. You can't punch and kick little kids. Plus, they always bring their best stuff against me. I don't know if it's a David versus Goliath thing or the opportunity to hit an adult without consequences, but they seem to relish it and usually win. After 3 months of muddling through lessons, it was time for my belt test. I was nervous having my skills on display, and to make matters worse, Adam, the guy who convinced me to do this in the first place, dropped out the week before the belt test, making me the only adult, the only person whose age was in double digits, in fact, going for a yellow belt. I was definitely having second thoughts about proceeding, but Tommy loved having me in class with him, and I know he'll soon be at that age where my very existence embarrasses him. So I want to capitalize on this window of time. There's no way I could bow out now, despite the risk of becoming an internet meme. Before the test, Tommy pumped me up by regurgitating some of my previous pep talks to him, which was nice. He also reminded me to go to the bathroom one last time. Even if it didn't feel like I needed to go. The student had become the master. During the test, I excelled in the 1 steps in form, with only minor critiquing from Master DiMatteo. Then came sparring. Since Adam wasn't there and there were an odd number of students, I had to square off against one of the instructors. While I was elated to not have to battle one of the kids in front of their parents and my wife, it didn't exactly seem fair having to go against a third-degree black belt either. It didn't go well, but I did pass. The final part of the test is the board break. That's right. I would need to break a 1-inch thick, solid, pine wood board with my bare foot. I'd be using the step behind side kick, which if performed correctly is a very powerful kick. We had practiced it in class using the pads, but never on an actual board, so I wasn't certain that I could do it. Now, technically, you can pass the test without actually breaking the board. And I've told Tommy numerous times that it is okay either way, and to just do his best. And I've consoled him after a test when he was unable to break his board. Despite my repeated reassurances, though, we all know that's just nonsense you're required to tell your kids. Obviously, it matters. So the students are all going at the same time, some taking multiple attempts. You'd occasionally hear a crack and then the applause of the assembled parents. Me, I took my time, set my feet, took a few deep breaths while I closed my eyes and visualized breaking the board. Then I did the kick with all the power that I had. Crack. I had snapped the board like a twig. Feelings of pride and relief washed over me. I bowed to Master DiMatteo and then waited somewhat smugly while the remaining students finished their attempts. Now, I either watched or proudly showed the video of my board break to friends 100 times. On the 101st time, I happened to notice a little girl in the background doing the exact same kick with a lot less force. In fact, just giving it a little pop and still managing to break the board. That was a little deflating at first, and certainly put my accomplishment in perspective. I've decided not to focus on that, though. Instead, I focused on the middle-aged man in the video, living out a childhood dream. And more importantly, on the kids you can see standing behind me, because you can very clearly see Tommy encouraging me before my kick and enthusiastically cheering for me after I'd smashed the board. And as a father, that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Repeats itself, trying you'll succeed. Never doubt that you're the one.